My name is Sue Edwards. I'm a qualified and experienced workplace coach and also a career consultant currently working in the University of Westminster Careers and Employability Service. My most recent role was a senior manager role in the NHS when I was last in the UK, and I'm also a master's dissertation stage student at Birkbeck College studying in organisational psychology. So lovely to be with you all this evening. Before I introduce our speaker, just some housekeeping. Please note we will finish the event at 7:30 p.m. rather than 8 p.m. There will be time for Q&A, as Sunita has alluded to, after her presentation. This talk is being recorded. It will be edited and made available on YouTube, on our YouTube channel when it's ready, and we will send you the link. Your cameras and microphones are automatically turned off. But the live general group chat is on, so please use the general chat box to ask Sunita questions. Colleagues moderating this event will collate your questions throughout the talk, and I'll put these to Sunita at the end of her presentation. Please use the general group chat for anything else. So I'm delighted to introduce our alumni speaker for today's talk, Sunita Harley, who will share her top tips on how to make your voice heard as you navigate your career. Sunita graduated from Westminster in 2001 with an MA in Human Resource Management. She is the founder of award-winning professional development, coaching and inclusion consultancy, Collective Insight. As a certified coach, she has equipped individuals to navigate challenges and thrive in their careers. During this talk, Sunita will cover some topics, including how to shape your CV and LinkedIn profile, making a good impression in your new job, job application guidance, and showcasing your skills and achievements in interviews. And just a quick reminder before I pass over to Sunita that those of you who have graduated still have access to career support through our service for 18 months, logging on to engage with your student email and thereafter registering with the alumni office with your personal email. You have support for up to 3 years. So I'll pass over to Sunita now, then I'll come back online for the Q&A. Please do remember to put any questions you have in the general chat box throughout Sunita's presentation. Over to you, Sunita.
Thank you so much, Sue. It's great to see everyone today, and I know that we'll be interacting through the chat box. So thank you so much for joining this session on what it takes to make your voice heard. And when I was looking at what to talk about today, your colleagues at the University of Westminster and the University of Westminster alumni team mentioned a number of things that people are always really curious about. Now, in my work as a coach, I know that these topics come up all of the time. Even earlier this week, I was delivering a talk, a closing keynote talk to an organisation called City Century, and it was an organisation where there were 200 students who joined, and it actually reminded me of those days when I was looking for my first ever job, something that wasn't just going to be a part-time job or a temporary role, but a job that I really wanted to build a career in. But where do we start? And today I'll be talking about different examples, whether you are studying at the University of Westminster, whether you have joined as one of our alumni peers and you used to go to the University of Westminster like I did, or maybe you're a part of someone's external network. So there might be people here today who are at different points in their careers. Some people might be thinking about what they want to do when they finish their qualification or their degree or their master's or their postgrad studies at University of Westminster. Some people might already be in a job and thinking about, what do I want to do next? What kind of place do I want to work at? So people might be at different stages in their careers here today, and that's okay. So what does it take to make your voice heard? There are so many things that I can talk about when we cover this topic, but what will you hear about today? So as you can see on this slide, this summarises the 4 blocks of our webinar today. The first section will cover how to shape your CV. And more people are on LinkedIn now, or using LinkedIn to basically build their career. And so I'll actually show you my example of my LinkedIn profile and just talk through some of the thinking, some of the reasons why I've added certain things. I'll also talk to you about top tips for writing your job applications. And where do you start here? So I'm sorry that I can't write your job application for you, but I will definitely share some different tips. I'll also talk about how we can talk about our own skills and achievements in interviews. Now, for some people, this can actually be quite difficult. Not everybody knows how to talk about their skills or their own achievements. For some of us, it might be a bit daunting. It might be quite comfortable for some of us. We're used to doing that kind of thing. But I will just share a few top tips for that process and that approach. And then lastly, I'll talk about actually how do you make a good impression in a new job or in a new role. You may be moving internally in an organization. You may have been promoted. You might even be starting your first role. So I'll be sharing some good tips there. I'll also be sharing some of my own career stories, which I hope that you enjoy hearing about. But again, really hoping that you take away some helpful takeaways from those stories and experiences. Now, this is all about making your voice heard. This is about talking about yourself, talking about what you can bring to a role, what you can bring to a team, what you can bring to an organization. This is also about how you write about yourself and how you communicate, again, what you can bring to a role. And then also how you verbalize, so how you physically talk about it, how you communicate about your skills and your achievements in interviews. And there are so many things that we can do once we're in our role as well, in terms of making our voice heard. And I'll share some examples for that later on. So a bit about me. So I actually started my career in fashion, media and music. So that was after I completed my BA in anthropology and human geography at UCL. And I moved into the media and I was working in fashion and also music. But I knew at that point, even though I was doing some really interesting work, working with interesting brands like Nike, The Body Shop, I knew that that wasn't going to be my longer term career and I didn't want it to be my longer term career. So I actually decided to go back to university, and I'm really pleased that I chose University of Westminster for my postgrad studies. And that's where I did my master's in human resources management. That really shaped my career for me. I knew that I didn't want to work in the media roles that I was working in anymore. I really wanted to focus on my studies. And I realized that I would be going into a completely different sector as well. So although I had certain skills from my different roles in fashion and music, so you'll see here on the top row in the middle, there's a picture of me DJing. I had great skills from that role. I also worked in fashion, which meant I had to be incredibly organized. I had to really plan my day. I had to really think about first impressions. I had to do a lot of networking, and I also had to build relationships as well in terms of getting to know different teams, understanding people's different roles in the organization. So again, bringing together like lots of different skills. But when I completed my master's in human resources management, that's when I really knew I wanted to do something different. I did want to go into HR, and my first ever role was actually as an EA to the HR director at an organisation called Morley Fund Management, which is now known as Aviva Investors. And My colleagues and my boss at the time knew that I was studying for my HR master's, and I was basically in the process of completing my dissertation. And so they knew that I naturally wanted to move into an official HR role. But that was a great thing for me that I had that opportunity. But it did take me some time to firstly settle into that corporate environment, to adjust to a new kind of sector, new different kind of corporate behaviors, new expectations and values. And so it's really important that I prepared for that. So I will be again sharing some learning lessons about my career with you today. Now, what have I been doing since that point? This week in November 2024, I've actually realised and remembered that I've actually been working 20 years in the legal sector. So whether that's as an HR professional, learning and development professional, an inclusion consultant, or an executive coach. And every time I've either gone for a new role, or maybe I've sent in a job application, or maybe put myself forward for promotion, I've had to think about how I can make my voice heard in terms of talking about my own skills, my own qualities that I can bring to the new role, or also my achievements. Now, one of the things that I really talk about is confidence, careers, and well-being. And that is the main focus for my podcast, which I launched in 2020 during lockdown. And if you want to hear more about the podcast or listen to some of the episodes, then you can look them up on Spotify or podcast, or you can just Google Lucky Things Podcast. There's one episode that I will flag later on to you in particular, and that's about why it's important that we do celebrate our skills and achievements. This is really, really important. And it can actually give you quite a nice grounding for when you have to, say, write your CV, prepare for an interview, or maybe actually you're meeting your new team for the first time and they want to get to know you. Now, if I fast forward 20 years since my first corporate role, what do I do now? I deliver a number of different workshops at organisations, and that means that I do have to talk about my achievements. They want to know, why should they work with Sunita Harley at Collective Insight? They want to know, what skills will I bring to a particular project or an assignment or a particular workshop. They'll also want to know what it's like working with me as a coach, or how will I look after their questions? How will I support them? And just moving around the pictures here, the bottom left picture is me talking on a live radio show on the BBC, and that was brilliant. That was actually for BBC Asian Network a number of years ago. And again, I had to use my voice to talk about what I did and to talk about some of my skills and achievements. Now, I was really proud that in 2023, I was awarded Diversity Champion of the Year at the Women and Diversity in Law Awards. So that's the bottom middle picture there with the purple background. You might recognise one person in particular in that photo. Don't worry if you don't. I'll introduce her, but it's Baroness Floella Benjamin, and she used to present a huge TV show on the BBC in the late 70s, 80s. And Baroness Floella Benjamin is an incredible champion for inclusion and also social justice. So it was fantastic having the chance to meet her. But again, when I met her, I was obviously a bit starstruck, and I was thinking, wow, she has achieved so much in her career. She brings so many different skills, so many different talents. But it also reminded me that even just listening to her speech in that particular evening, she was talking about, where she started in her career and some of the challenges in her career, and why it's really important to stay confident about what you bring to the team. the last picture that I wanted to talk about quickly, and again, I really had to use my voice in this picture because I was delivering a conference to 90 partners for a city law firm, and I was talking about inclusion and also leadership. And it was really important that not that I just physically made sure that my voice was heard, but I made sure I was talking about the right things so that people would listen, people would feel interested, and people would feel curious. So I might touch on some of those themes today about how can you make sure that you really do engage with people when you're talking about your skills and your achievements. So what does it mean to make your voice heard? So I'd love you, just for those of you who have dialed into this webinar live, I'd love you to just mention in the chat box, what does it mean to make your voice heard? And I just want you to choose one word, and I'm going to call out some of those words that you put in the chat box so that those who are watching this recording can also benefit from some of the responses. So just in the chat box, share one word. What does it mean to make your voice heard? Brilliant. Authentic. Absolutely. We need to make sure that our voice sounds authentic, that it sounds like us. Valued and appreciated. So when we do share our voice, whether it's our opinions, our story, our insights, we feel valued, influenced, and unique. So again, we can use our voice actually to stand out, to talk about our skills and our achievements. We might be sharing our opinion. Absolutely. We feel acknowledged. So again, similar to feeling valued and appreciated. Using your voice to showcase your skills and talents. And again, similar to authentic, feeling genuine, inspirational. So you might be inspiring yourself, you might be inspiring others, and using your voice to also gain recognition. Someone has mentioned assurance. Maybe that's you're giving assurance to other people, but also maybe you want assurance through what you're talking about. An advocate as well. So really standing up, thinking about that. Excellent. And linked to feeling confident in our voice, we want to be assertive as well. Thank you so much. So I'll first talk about how to shape your CV and also your LinkedIn profile. Now, obviously, we're going to touch on these topics in a lighter way today. So I really encourage you to do your own research whenever you need to either start your CV, rewrite your CV, update your CV, or maybe you need to totally refresh your CV. And this is really important that you think about what the purpose is of your CV. I'll also share some tips about LinkedIn and how you can get started with your LinkedIn profile, or maybe how you can just again refresh your LinkedIn profile. So I thought I would share a quote by Nelson Mandela. And Nelson Mandela said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." Now, as a coach, one of the things that I do with various clients is actually help them to write their CV, or maybe I review their CV and we'll look at how we can refresh it and make sure that it really captures their skills and their achievements, that it captures their personality, their values. But I often am told by clients, Sunita, I have no idea where to start when it comes to my CV. Or I've had this CV in place for, say, 5 years because I haven't needed to look for another role. And actually now I need to come back to it. And again, it's just not working for me, or it's just so out of date. So sometimes writing your CV, it can bring up a lot of different feelings. It might be overwhelm. You might be feeling anxious about how do you write about yourself. You might feel unclear about what direction to take. For some of us, we might be feeling a bit energized. You might think, oh, this is kind of exciting. I'm going to do my CV and explore different opportunities. Or actually, it can also feel quite rewarding because you're actually going through all of your career or work experiences or your volunteering, opportunities or your educational achievements or anything else that you've done that you can bring into your CV. And it can actually be quite therapeutic sometimes, actually kind of just reflecting on all of those things, or just putting it down onto a piece of paper or typing it up onto a Word document. But I acknowledge, this can feel quite a big task. So I hope these tips will be helpful. So the first thing that I really want you to think about, and again, I'm going to ask those who have dialed in today just to share their contributions via the chat box. I would just like you to reflect and just add in the chat box, what is the best thing that your CV can do for you? So what is the purpose of your CV? What would you love your CV to do? Brilliant. Sell yourself to employers. Thank you very much. Highlight the skills that you've gained. Absolutely. You want the CV to really showcase your skills and also showcase specific skill set that is really relevant to the role that you're applying for. Highlight your skills. Somebody said, brand yourself in the best way. Absolutely. This is about your brand. And I'll just take a moment to explain what that means. But your personal brand is basically what you are known for. What do people remember when they work with Sunita? What do they value when they work with you? Showcase your achievements, show a picture of your personality and also your life progress. So brilliant words there, your actual progress, things that you've achieved along the way. And also, one of the best things that your CV can do for you is to help you stand out. So you do need to remember that in most cases, when an employer or a recruiter is looking to fill a vacancy, they will receive so many CVs. So I'm going to share my version of what I think a great CV is. I'm also sharing my insights today because when I worked in HR, I used to interview lots and lots and lots of people, and I would also review literally hundreds of CVs. And so I always remember those CVs that felt a certain way. They felt easy to read. They looked clear. I could see that somebody had taken a lot of care over their CV, and people really thought about what they were including on the CV. So really come back to that first step of thinking about what is it that you want your CV to do for you, and what is the best thing that your CV could do for you. So it might be that you want to stand out from a list of candidates. It might be that, again, you want to showcase all your relevant skills and achievements. Or maybe because you're also thinking ahead, you're thinking, I want my CV to get me to the next stage in the application process, whether that is a telephone or video call interview, a face-to-face interview, maybe it's some kind of skills assessment or exercise that you need to do. So thank you. So ideas for structuring your CV. And these are things that I often mention when someone asks me to review their CV. The first thing is to make sure that you have a really brief summary at the top. Some people might call this a biography. Some people might use the subject heading candidate profile. And I think candidate profile or personal profile work really well. Now, please note that I've mentioned brief here. This has got to be brief. It's got to be either a paragraph, or I usually recommend, just so it's easy for the CV reader, who might be a manager, the recruiting professional, somebody in the agency, or somebody who's scanning CVs. You want to make sure that it's really easy for them to see in, say, about 5 bullet points why you are a candidate or an individual that they need to meet for this opportunity. So, for example, if I was writing my own CV, at the top, I would talk about the number of years I've been working in a particular industry, or if I'm new to that sector or it's one of my first roles, I would talk about why I'm really interested in that particular organization. And I would also talk about some skills as well that I have gained. So if I haven't got experience to talk about, then I would talk about some skills. And I would literally do that in like 5 bullet points. Now, in these 5 bullet points for your candidate profile, you also want to think about your academic achievements. So you might want to talk about some of the grades that you've got, some of the topics that you've studied that are relevant to that role or which might be of interest. You want to talk about anything else you've achieved. Maybe you've done some volunteer work. Maybe you know about client service because you've worked in retail or in a supermarket or in another role. Really think about what are 5 things that I want them to see first, which really make me stand out. I can't stress this enough, but the second arrow in the middle is making sure your CV is tailored for the role and the firm or the organization that you're applying to work at. You should never just do a CV and send it out to all the same places in the same shape. So it means that you might need to restructure your CV. I know this takes time, but it is really worth it. So you might want to tailor your CV by looking at the job spec and thinking about, right, what are the, say, 5 core things that they're looking for from that role? And most job specs will have a lot of detail in there. They'll list the responsibilities. They might give you some context to the role or the team. And they might also talk about competencies as well. So expected competencies such as collaboration or teamwork, highly organized, time management, client service or problem solving. So think about the things that they're mentioning on the job spec and make sure that you are referring to those headings in your CV if you wish. Now, this then means that you can really write about your career history or your educational history and other achievements in a way that is related to the role that you are applying for. So most of the time, people do like to see a CV where they can see someone's journey, whether it's their educational journey and then their any kind of career or work experience that they have gained or any of their previous roles. So I always recommend, this is what it's called, to have a chronological CV. But if, say, you were moving to a completely different kind of role or you may be going for an internal promotion, then maybe you might want to shape your CV slightly differently. And again, it would need to be tailored for the role that you're going for, but you might actually want to have sections in your CV that actually focus on the core skills or the core responsibilities for that new role. And so it's really easy for your reviewers, your CV reviewers, to actually say, right, actually, they've done all of these examples of team management, for example, or they have all of these examples of delivering particular projects. So think about that approach as well. But in most cases, for applying for new roles in new organizations or going through the standard recruitment process, then you want to think about a chronological CV, which people can see basically your journey and up to where you are now. Now, it's really important. Obviously, we want to talk boldly about our skills and our achievements and things that we have gained along the way. But it's really important that this is factual. So please don't exaggerate on your CV. Make sure that everything you put on your CV is linked to something that you have actually done. Because when you talk about this in the interview, if it's relating to something that you have contributed to, you will be able to talk more confidently about it. Factual examples are also really important with regards to your education. Now, I'm sure this must sound like common sense, but for example, if you were really close to getting a 2-1, but you actually ended up getting a 2-2, but you think, oh, actually, I'll just mention 2-1 for the modules that I did, and I won't mention my overall grade. Remember, people just want to know, honestly, what you achieved. So please only refer to the grade that you achieved. Now, it's up to you as well if you can share some examples of achievements or contributions that are actually, again, linked to that role profile. One thing I do suggest is that you don't just copy the role profile and put that in your CV or just copy all the key responsibilities and put that in your CV. What you need to do is really think about what have you contributed to? Where is your relevant experience? So, for example, for me, one thing that is on my CV is project managing employee engagement surveys. So when I mention this on my CV, then I talk about which firm I delivered this, what the impact was, and what my role in that project was. So it just gives people a little bit of context. But you also need to make sure that your CV looks very clear and very easy to read. So I highly recommend using bullet points for that, with some clear headings to separate either your different roles that you've delivered already, or maybe anything that you want to cover off in terms of showcasing your skills. Some, again, could be quite obvious, but things not to mention on your CV. You do not need to put your date of birth. You do not need to put your home address. And these days, it's actually optional whether you put your mobile number on there or not. I always recommend that you include your email so people can contact you. And I also recommend think about your email. So make sure it's an email that looks professional. Say, for example, I had an email which was linked to, I don't know, a nickname that one of my friends calls me, and it might not look as professional. So think about that. It might be that you want to actually set up a different email so that it does just feel and look more professional. Other things not to mention on your CV are things that you feel you've done, but again, they aren't quite related to the role. Now, this might be quite tricky for those who are starting out in their careers, because you do, in your case, you would need to talk about everything that you've done so far, because that is your work experience. And CVs should be a document that anyone can see your transferable skills. So the qualities that you're going to bring to that role that you have demonstrated in another role, even if it's a completely different job title or a different role. So this is the episode that I wanted to flag, just in case there are any podcast fans. But I decided to record this episode because I think a lot of people can sometimes find it challenging to celebrate their skills and talents. There might be a real fear here that you might be bragging, that you might be exaggerating, or people might not even believe you, or you're just not sure how to start in terms of talking about yourself. So I wanted to just signpost this podcast episode in case that's of any interest for anybody. Now, some top tips for shaping your LinkedIn. And in a moment, I'll actually show you the top half of my LinkedIn, which is live on LinkedIn. So you can actually go and look at the rest of my LinkedIn profile in detail when you have time. So there are three main sections that you should be thinking about first when it comes to your LinkedIn. The fourth thing that I recommend is that you choose a photo which looks professional. Now, what do I mean when I say the word professional? I want to make sure on my LinkedIn there is a photo that obviously firstly looks like me. It shows how I dress in the workspace. Now, obviously that can vary depending on what sector you work in. You don't necessarily have to wear a suit, for example. Also, there is the option to not have your photo on LinkedIn, and actually that's okay. And that might be a personal preference or for particular very rational reasons, and that's okay. And then with the headline wording, you basically have about 220 characters. So it's actually quite a short kind of paragraph that you have to to talk about yourself, and it's the text that comes underneath your name, and usually it might mention before the headline wording your latest job title, or maybe you're a student, maybe you're a student at University of Westminster. So this is basically information that is under your name, and it gives people a really quick snapshot in terms of, right, who is this person, what do they do. You can also put in there what opportunities you're looking for, which is a great thing to do if you're studying at the moment. Or you might want to say aspiring. So for example, I want to be an aspiring accountant, or I want to be an aspiring marketeer, so again, you can kind of give people a clue in terms of the opportunities that you're looking for. Now, interesting with LinkedIn at the moment, so this is really handy for people who are at that academic stage and they might be starting to look for their first role in their career. There is a little banner that you can put on top of your photo, which actually says open to work. So you might actually see that on some people's profiles. And that's basically just making it very clear, look, I'm open to new opportunities. Obviously, if you are starting to look for a role on a confidential basis and you do not wish everyone in your network or the public to see your LinkedIn profile that you're looking, then obviously don't use that banner open to work. The About section gives you a little bit more content to play with. So I believe this is around 2,000 characters. And again, I'll show you part of my About section in a moment. But this is your opportunity to talk about who you are, what kind of roles you're interested in, or some of your achievements. And again, it's like a little picture of what this person has done so far. If you are in the early career stage, so when I talk about early career stage, I'm talking about anyone in their first few years of employment, or maybe they're about to start their career or they're currently studying, then you might want to talk about some of your academic achievements or any volunteering or part-time roles or full-time roles that you've delivered already. Your career history is when you literally go into detail, and that's where you can actually lift information from your CV. But remember, on LinkedIn, it shouldn't necessarily feel like your CV. It needs to be a little bit more brief in terms of each of those roles. But you want to talk about your career history, and there's obviously the sections that you can add, whether it's volunteering or there's the education section as well. And so it's important that you, again, detail factually what you've done in terms of your career history. So this is just an example, just to kind of illustrate some things. And everyone's LinkedIn profile is obviously going to look different. So please don't feel that you have to replicate anyone's LinkedIn profile. But I just wanted to talk through some of the things that I decided to do with my LinkedIn profile. So the first thing is that I really wanted to make sure that there was a picture of me. In my work, I do need to go in front of lots of audiences. I'm very proud of my heritage. I want people to know that this is what I look like. And actually, yes, I will look professional. If I turn up at your organisation for a meeting or to deliver a workshop, or I deliver a one-to-one coaching meeting with you, I want people to know, right, Sunita will be professional in terms of how she comes across. But we mentioned the word earlier on, and the word genuine and authentic. And so for me, it's actually quite important that I have a picture that represents me. And so, yes, I've got my bright colours there, my red blazer, one of my smart green dresses. And actually, that is one of the things that I'm known for, for dressing quite bright in the corporate sector. So that photo is actually really important. It's really important that you're happy with your photo. You do not need to get a professional photo done. These days with your phone, you can ask someone to take a picture of you. Sometimes it's quite nice actually if you have a plain background to have a photo taken against, or maybe even outside. But think about, again, the kind of photo that you have on your LinkedIn profile. Now, there's nothing wrong with this, but sometimes I notice that some people have photos that they've taken maybe they're out kind of with their friends at a social event, maybe it's a picture from, say, a wedding. But again, just think about the outfit that you are wearing. Is it something that you would wear when you were going for your interview? And I always think that's a really good kind of measure. What would you be wearing at your interview? That's a good guide for what you can also wear on your LinkedIn photo. Now, remember, you can change your LinkedIn photo as many times as you want. So when you're in the role, you might wish to change your photo and maybe the dress code is a bit more relaxed where you're working. So you can kind of mirror that dress code. Now you'll see here that I've got a banner and then I've got my Collective Insight logo. But on my banner, I wanted to just make it really clear, like, what do I do? Obviously, I have lots of different clients. They might approach me for different services. So it's really important that I talk about what kind of services do I offer in terms of the diversity, equity, inclusion work. I can also deliver workshops for them, and I'm also a certified coach. That's where I've started to talk about my qualifications. Now, one thing on your LinkedIn profile that you can do, and this is optional, is you can actually put your pronouns on there. I've decided to do that because I want to symbolize to other people that I care about allyship, that people can share their pronouns with me if they wish. And then you'll see underneath my name, there's a little speaker sign, the little speaker symbol. And basically, this gives you the opportunity, if you wish, the chance to actually record your name. So you can record your name and help people understand how to pronounce your name. I really like this function because I would want somebody to pronounce my name right. And so this is actually a really helpful thing that people can use. Now you've then got the wording underneath. This is what we call the headline wording. And so this is about really capturing in 200 characters. And remember, that's not 200 words, that's 200 characters or 220 characters. What you do. It doesn't have to be as long as this. Remember, I've been in my career for over 20 years. So obviously there are lots of different things that I can talk about. But really think about, again, what's the first thing you want people to know about you in terms of what kind of work you want to get into or what you do in your role or do in your career. So this is my about section on LinkedIn, and this is actually only part of it. So you have about 2,000 characters for this section, so you can go into more detail. But what I've decided to do, just to make it a bit clearer for when people read it, is to actually put bullet points and also spaces. So I have noticed some LinkedIn profiles, there's like long paragraphs, which are absolutely fine. But for me, with the way that I tend to absorb information is that I like to see a little bit of space between the lines, so that I can really kind of like pull out the information about someone's LinkedIn profile. With this, I have had to use my voice in my LinkedIn about section. So I really had to think about, right, what are all of the achievements or the skills or experiences or expertise that I need to communicate in this about section? And more people are using LinkedIn now to find candidates for opportunities. So it's really important that you do invest time in your LinkedIn about section. This is like a little mini CV in a way. It's a bit like your bio that you have at the top of your CV. I've talked about a bit about who I am, like what do I do, but I've also talked about some of the firms or organizations that I've worked at in the past, some of the work that I've delivered. I think it's really important to talk about what you've delivered in your roles, whether that's delivered excellent client service in your retail job, or maybe you've delivered a certain project. And then any kind of accolades or achievements. So accolades are anything like, you know, if you're further down in your career, you might have been nominated for different awards or received an employee recognition award at work, or maybe you volunteer for a particular organisation. Again, you know, that's something interesting about you. So put that in your about section. So I'm going to move on to top tips for writing job applications. So I'm going to start with, firstly, to reread the questions that they're asking. Now, most job applications now these days will involve going onto the career portal for an organisation in most cases and actually completing a standard job application online. They might ask kind of routine questions about whether it's your visa status or your right to work in the UK. They might need some personal data. I'm very conscious that these days a lot of organisations do want to track the diversity of their candidates so that they can understand if they are attracting people from different diverse communities or underrepresented communities in their organisation. For me, I am really comfortable sharing that data because I think from an HR perspective, I know how important it is. And from an inclusion perspective, I know how important it is. So you also have the option to kind of answer any of the questions that they ask. They might also ask you about if you have any particular requirements in your role as well, or any requirements if you were to attend or join an interview online. So again, be honest about that if that's something that you need. So really reread the questions that they're asking and don't assume that every job kind of application portal is going to be exactly the same. Now, pay attention to any word limit for any of your responses. So they might actually ask you, right, could you provide some examples of where you've demonstrated excellent teamwork skills? So think about that word limit. And my top tip here is to actually prep your answers on a Word document or a draft email to yourself so that you can actually monitor the word limit or the word count. Again, just like your CV, you need to really tailor the examples that you're showing on the job application for the role that you are going to aim for having an interview. Now, you also want to tailor your examples for the organisation. So if you go on their website, remember you can demonstrate their research and also you can make sure that you refer to any of their values, for example, or maybe an interesting fact that you came across about the organisation. This is really, really important, but please check and recheck your application, just like your CV, for any typos. Now, for anybody who is neurodivergent or they're working with dyslexia or dyspraxia, then make sure you've got your own kind of checking mechanisms in place. But for anyone who's neurotypical, we can still easily make mistakes when it comes to typos. So it's really important that you recheck the work. And I always recommend this anyway, but ask someone else to read over your job application for you. So maybe you want to send them a Word version of your job application, just so they can give you feedback on your answers, how you're coming across. And one of the benefits of doing this is if you are somebody who you trust or who maybe knows you well, even if it's a friend, they don't have to have worked with you closely, they might actually be able to pinpoint some skills and achievements that you haven't thought of mentioning. So they'll be a bit of a cheerleader, a bit of a champion for you. So how do we actually talk about our skills and achievements in interviews? Now, I'd love to hear from you on the chat box, but what can get in the way of talking about our own skills and achievements? So I'll just let you come up with a few responses there and thoughts in terms of what can get in the way of us talking about our own skills and achievements. Absolutely, ourselves, we always get in our own way. Sometimes we think we're not good enough. Absolutely, we might be feeling a bit anxious. Anything else that can slow us down or maybe get in the way of us talking about our skills and achievements? It might also be that actually we don't know how to describe them, or actually we don't know what they are. Maybe we're so used to doing what we do, whether it's our studies, whether it's our job, that we don't recognise the achievements that we are gaining and contributing to along the way. And also, yes, if our achievements happened a long time ago, how do we talk about those? We don't want to feel out of date, but actually they were really important and they might actually have impacted us developing particular skills. So I acknowledge there are lots of different things that might get in the way. And yes, the fear of also being too boastful, or that fear of becoming arrogant if I talk about my own skills and my achievements. But again, the whole purpose of your CV, your interview, and your job application is to make sure that people understand what you are going to bring to that role and that team. I wanted to quickly talk about making a good impression in a new job. And this also means that we need to know how to talk about ourselves. We need to know how to introduce ourselves. And again, we don't want to come across in a non-collaborative way. We want to come across as a good team player. We want to show that we care about the organisation that we're coming into. We care about the team, that we're going to be a supportive colleague. But we also might have to introduce ourselves, which can actually sometimes feel a bit awkward. Or people might ask you, what are you excited about in terms of joining this job or this team? Why were you interested in this role? So even though you're past that interview stage, you might still be asked certain questions from your colleagues. So similar to being in that interview situation where we need to talk about our achievements, and we can talk about them in a very kind of clear way. We can talk about things that we are proud of in terms of what we've contributed to, and that might even just be like a really small task. You might also want to think about how you can make a good impression in a new job, because this is your opportunity for people to get to know you. And remember, professionalism varies depending on the sector, depending on the team, depending on the job. So once you arrive in the role, once you arrive in the team, you can also kind of read the culture. You can kind of read the ways of working, and you can kind of get a good impression in terms of what does professional mean in our particular environment at work. So making a good impression in a new job is really important. And I just wanted to give you an example of how I approached it once when I started a new role. Now, this new role was actually a number of years ago, and I was going to work in a law firm in a brand new role. I happened to know one of the people who worked in the team, but I was conscious that I was coming into a team of around 50 people, and I didn't know many people at all in the organisation. So I think for me, I really wanted to show that I was excited about working for that organisation. So I really researched them. Um, I was lucky to have been given lots of reading to do when I started the role. So I made sure that I got through as much as I could, but I also listed certain questions. I also made sure that I didn't just sit at my desk. I made sure that I walked around the floors. I would just smile at people. And if there was the opportunity, whether it was when we were making a tea or coffee in the morning or in the afternoon, and other people were next to me who I hadn't met, I would actually just say hello and just say, "Hi, I'm Sunita, I've just joined." And obviously, some people will be busy, but some people will reciprocate that, and they will also introduce themselves and talk about the role that they do. How else did I approach starting a new role? I also thought about the expectations of me. So, what were they asking me to do? When would they need certain tasks done by? Because again, that's how I'm going to be making a good impression, through the work that I'm doing. I also wanted to make sure that I started the new role and I was very clear on the structure of the organization or the structure of the team. So if I needed help with something in particular, then I knew who to go to. So my intranet, the firm's intranet, became my best friend basically, because there was so much information on there in terms of different teams, different points of contact, different support resources available. So here are 6 things that you can think about in terms of making a good impression in a new role. And this might also relate to people who are starting their first role in their career. It might be that you're moving into a different role. It might be that you're moving to a different role internally. Maybe you have made a sideways move to a different role, or you've been promoted. So I always say to people, prep your own induction. Now, obviously, when you start in most organizations these days, they will have an induction, whether it's IT, health and safety, etc. Some organisations talk about inclusion and how you can get involved in the firm, but also prep and design your own induction. Think about, who do you need to meet? What questions do you want answered? You might also want to just compile a list of questions as you go along in your first few days or your first few weeks, and then maybe take them to a colleague and ask them to kind of look after them in one go rather than asking questions every day. You also want to listen to feedback. So as you settle into your role, as you start delivering different tasks, people might give you an idea about how you're doing. And you want to listen to that positive feedback, because that's really great for our confidence when we start a new role. But you might also want to listen to feedback if you need to adjust any of your skills or expertise or your behaviours. So that's really important as well, to take that feedback on and really use it as a learning opportunity. Now, obviously we have job specs these days, or job descriptions, and we can see the role expectations. But again, it's only once you kind of get into the team, you understand how your role works, that's when you start understanding, what are the role expectations? What do people expect from me in terms of what I deliver in my work? What do I need to do to be a great team player in this particular company or environment? And behaviours are really, really important here. So do check if there is a competency framework or values or principles that you're expected to work to in terms of being a team player in that organisation. I always recommend, and similar to what I did in just about every role that I've started during my corporate career, is find your support network. So gradually over time, you might make connections around the team or around the organisation, but also make sure you research what are the support opportunities or support resources available to you as a colleague as well. And they might be listed on the intranet, there might be information from your HR team or your HR contact, or they might even be summarised in your offer paperwork. But it's really important that you have that support network in place. So before we wrap up for questions, I would like to just leave you with my ACE framework. I really want you to think about how you're going to successfully talk about your achievements. I want you to think about your communication approach. How can you communicate those, whether it's in writing, whether it's verbally in an interview? And then I also want you to think about how you can really engage with people. So if you are writing your CV, how can you make sure you capture their attention? How can you be responsive if they email you about an interview opportunity? Or maybe they have some questions about your experience. How can you engage with them in a positive way? And then when you're in the interview process, think again, how can I build a bit of rapport? And one of my top tips for interviews is engage by asking 3 really great questions about their organisation. Or you can ask your interviewers, what do you really enjoy about working in this company or in this organisation? Because that's a really great way to kind of engage, make links, and also get to know them as individuals. So I'm going to just quickly recap what we've covered today. Obviously, we have covered a lot here, but I'm going to wrap up now in terms of making sure that we have some time for questions.
Thank you, Sunita, for your presentation. There are a lot of great insights into how to make your voice heard, which I'm sure our virtual audience would have found useful. We now have time for questions, which have been collated throughout. So I'll just go ahead and pose those to you one by one, if that's okay, Sunita. And we just need to keep a wee eye on the clock. So we'll start with the first one. The question is, what should we do if our work experience is in a different sector than what we want to apply for? It's a double-barreled question. How can we still include them, or can we still include them, or should we just focus on the same sector experience and skills?
Obviously, it depends on the job spec. But what I would say is that you have to also focus on your transferable skills and your experiences that are going to be relevant to that role. So if you say, for example, I was moving from HR to marketing, I would need to go through my CV and pick out everything that is linked to marketing or linked to that new role that I'm going to go for. If it was a different sector, so for example, I mentioned before, I've worked in law firms quite a lot, but say I wanted to go and work in a retail bank, or a media company or a tech company, I would then really stress why I want to go and work in that sector. Like, why do I want to make that shift? Why do I want to go and work in a different sector? What can I bring to that sector? And really give some specific examples. It's also really important to demonstrate that you've researched the new sector as well. So you know what you're going into, you know about it. You're not just applying for the role because it just happens to be available. So I hope that helps.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Next question. Should I consider a picture of just me on LinkedIn, or is it okay to have a picture of me at an event with other people, in brackets, like a famous Arsenal goalkeeper?
So what I would suggest is your LinkedIn profile is about you. I would actually suggest just having your LinkedIn profile as you. And I support Arsenal, so obviously I care about who the goalkeeper is, but other people might not. And also, don't assume that everyone's going to recognize that celebrity, because they won't. So if you want to still include it somehow, then obviously, in your about section, you could talk about your passion for football or sports, and to say that you were very inspired when one day I met this goalkeeper who works for Arsenal, or who's one of the Arsenal team. But I think in terms of your profile picture, my advice, and this might vary for others, but my advice is just to have a picture of yourself. You can also tell from a lot of people's pictures where they've cropped it so tightly because they're standing next to other people. So again, these days, you can actually just ask someone to take a picture of you using your phone camera, where you are just the focus of that picture.
Sounds good. Thank you. Should you showcase your achievements even if they are several years old?
Yes, I think that is important. Again, if it's relevant to the role that you're going for, depending on when I guess, like where you are at in your career. So if I was to apply for a new role next month, I probably wouldn't talk about when I worked in the supermarket when I was 16 years old. Um, I probably wouldn't talk about the time when I was a research assistant in university. However, if I was going for a research role, I probably would talk about that. But really think about what is your most relevant career examples that you want to showcase. And then you can still talk about all the other roles that you've done by just listing them, but you don't necessarily have to go into detail about what you did. So people can just even see, oh, actually, they have delivered other roles, they have got lots of experience, but you're going into more detail with the roles where you think that is going to make me stand out.
Thank you, Sunita. Just two more. When you are tailoring your application for each company, how long should you give yourself to produce a bespoke cover letter, CV, and in my case, a portfolio?
So it depends what's involved in terms of the portfolio. So is it examples of documents that you've produced before? Is it your design work? So I can't really put a time frame on that. But I think don't put a time limit on these things, because you need to know when you are comfortable with the quality of your CV, the covering letter, the application. Don't assume, oh, I can just do that in half an hour and that's fine because I've spent half an hour on it. I think it would probably be a bit harmful if I said you only need to spend an hour and that's it. The outcome should be a high quality, clear, and reader friendly CV and application.
Right. So it depends. Completely agree. Thank you so much. This is a longer one. I asked my previous boss to give me a recommendation on LinkedIn, and they said they would, but they haven't done it and haven't replied to me since. I even sent a draft for them to edit. how can I get them to give me a recommendation, or should I ask another colleague?
I think I always feel people might not be responsive for a number of reasons. They might generally just be busy. Um, they might be unsure about what to write. Um, they might also be unsure about actually, am I allowed to give a recommendation? So for some organisations, they do have a policy where actually colleagues can't give other colleagues recommendations. Um, so what I would do is maybe just check in one last time and just say that, I appreciate that you're busy. Um, if you're not able to do this, then I understand. Um, and there's no harm in asking another colleague. And hopefully, though, that other colleague will also do the due diligence or check if they're able to do that. Um, I actually asked somebody to give me a LinkedIn recommendation the other day, but it was somebody, a coaching client who I worked with. And that's because they sent me some positive feedback on an email, and then I said, oh, actually, you know what, I would love to this to be a LinkedIn testimonial if you're happy to do that. And then I sent them the request. Interestingly, I got the recommendation back, but there was a very small typo, like not their fault at all, but there was just a small typo in my company name. So I had to actually go back and ask them to adjust that, which they did. But I think, just remember that not everyone's in a position to give a LinkedIn recommendation, but think about if you've done any other roles where you can get those recommendations as well.
Terrific. And just one very short last question. Thank you so much for bearing with us here, Sunita. It is LinkedIn Premium helpful? So yeah, should they pay that extra and join LinkedIn Premium? Is it helpful?
So I would say you need to research this, because I don't know anything about the context, the reason why you want to use it. So I would actually, there are so many resources about LinkedIn Premium. So I would actually ask you to research that yourself. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to give you that guidance. Um, LinkedIn Premium is not essential, um, but it obviously has its benefits in terms of connecting with people, how you get to communicate with people. But also think about your LinkedIn profile and think about the kind of posts that you're commenting on, because obviously anyone who sees your LinkedIn profile, if it's public, then people can see the kind of post that you're commenting on. Think about that if you're looking for a particular role. Um, it might be that you want to actually follow the organization that you're applying to work with. So again, that's just a little bit of engagement, and it's just a really great way to kind of learn about different organizations. Um, and for some people, actually, it's not about posting all the time, but it's more about commenting or reposting or just liking someone else's content. So also don't feel that pressure to generate lots of content yourself. If you go onto my LinkedIn page, you'll see that I do generate my own content, but that's because firstly, I love writing. um, that's why I set up my blog, many, many years ago. But I like sharing practical know-how, and it's linked to my work. And I like sharing personal stories so people get to kind of understand me and what I do in my work and what interests me and some of the topics that I'm passionate about. But I always think that, you know, what you follow, what you contribute to also creates a story about you. So make sure you're presenting yourself in the best way.
There's just a couple more very quick questions in the chat. We'll probably just need to answer these fairly briefly. One regarding how would you tailor your application or CV if you're returning from a career break? Typically it might be those who've been on parental leave of some kind. Would you like to just address that quickly for us, Sunita, please?
Absolutely. So career breaks these days can refer to anything, whether it's parental leave, whether it's long-term recovery or sick leave. It might be that someone's taking out a career break because they might have carer responsibilities, or maybe they wanted to do traveling or focus on volunteering work, or maybe they just needed a break. So I always say it's good to be honest about that. But what you could also do is when you mention that there's a career break in your CV, then maybe just bring out some of the skills or some of your achievements or some of the things that you were focused on during that time. And again, whether it's your CV or application, to really stress why you are so interested and so committed to the role that you're applying for. Some people will naturally ask about career breaks in interviews because they'll be curious about what somebody was doing, what was the reason for the career break, what did they do in that time, what are they going to do to make sure that they're up to speed with their role or their sector. So again, just be prepared for that.
Lovely, thank you. And we will make this the last one, but I feel it's important that we ask it. I know the Careers Service has been doing some work with an organisation called My Plus, who work with those who are neurodivergent or living with specific challenges. The question is this, Sunita, should we highlight our neurodivergence? For example, ADHD, and this person had been told that some employers actively seek out those people for their skills and creativity and the added value that they might bring, work output and so on. Would you like to answer that one as our final question, please?
Yes, happy to answer that. So I work with lots of individuals who self-identify as neurodivergent. I call them neurostrengths as well. And I think it really is up to you as an individual. You might be asked to declare anything that's classed as a disability or anything that's classed as a neurodiversity. It's up to you then to choose if you wish to share that. You might want to think about when is the right time for me to declare that I have a particular neurodivergence that would be helpful for my employer or for my manager or for my team to know about. That might be in the interview stage if you feel comfortable. It might be actually when you start a role to say, just to explain, look, actually, this is how I thrive in my work, or this is the support or the systems that I need around me to make sure that I can contribute fully. Or these are the kind of situations where actually I might need a little bit of encouragement or support, and share some clear examples. But I would also recommend that you seek lots of different advice and guidance from specialist websites about how to approach that, because again, there are so many different neurodiversities which can benefit from different things in place in the workplace. Now, I guess I'm lucky. I work with a lot of organizations who want to make sure that everyone thrives in the workplace. And so, a number of employers, they welcome that information, so they know how they can support you. And also a number of their employees and colleagues, they don't always know that they are neurodivergent. They might be diagnosed a bit later on in their career. So again, they might have particular support in place. And I think you need to make that decision yourself when you feel confident and comfortable to declare it.
Great answer, thank you. That's all we have time for, everyone. Thank you to Sunita for your insights and your guidance today.